Kirsty here from The Fit Business, and today I wanted to talk to you about 5 common mistakes that are potentially ruining your bar progress and why. Now, I have seen tons of bar classes available to jump into on YouTube, but often they don't focus on form and explanation of what you ought to be doing and how to execute it beautifully. So today I'm just going to take you through some common mistakes that I see in my physical classes that I think are going to set you on the right path to help you improve your progress, and also above all things just to keep those little knees, those little hips and everything safe along the way. So it is worth mentioning that there has been a bit of an explosion of ballet bar instructors available for your consumption. Now, my words of wisdom would be choose your instructor carefully and just make sure that they are fit for purpose. Now, there are some really common pitfalls you can fall into that if you don't really understand the movement method, actually you can do yourself some problems down the track. So it's really worth making sure that your instructor is really competent and they understand what they're asking you to do, just so that you stay safe and you are effective in the long term without compromising that spinal health, without compromising that joint health, and just making sure that you're not wasting your time above all things. So the first common mistake that I wanted to talk you through is what I like to call crab hands. Now, this annoys me more than any of the other ones, to be honest, mainly because you can see what it's done to my neck and my face. It has brought stress and tension to my neck and my face. Now, let me explain why this is really common. In a bar class, there is actually tons to think about at any given moment. Foot placement, knee positioning, pelvic placement, spinal placement. What am I doing with my feet? What am I doing with my arm? And so all of that external thought process, kind of the stress comes into the hands and you close the gap. So when the hands are like this, you can see that my traps, the muscles up in the top of my neck, have really stiffened up, really tightened up. Also, I'm creating huge amounts of stress in the forearms that actually, after a period of time, actually gets quite uncomfortable. So the solution to crab hands, it appears in all guises, I'm telling you, is just to keep the fingers soft. So practice with me now. The hands, shake them out and then just let them rest, let them be. Now, the first finger leads in our hand placement, so you just want to make sure that there is distance between those fingertips and the hands are soft, because now you see, as I take my arms through the positioning, so we have first, second and fifth here, nothing gets stressed in my face and my neck. If I try and replicate it here, you can see the movement is actually really stilted and all of that stress goes up into the neck. Now, girls in particular tend to carry their tension up here in their shoulders. So having the soft fingers, soft face, just really encourages both a smoother movement, but also it takes that stress and that tension and that focus out of the head, out of the neck, and then you can actually just concentrate on the rest of the movements. Now, what I would say is if you are a beginner and you are new to a bar class, one of the best things you can actually do is just stick your hands on your hips. As soon as you put your hands on your hips, you don't have to think about where are my arms. You can actually focus on that leg movement. So when in doubt, if you cannot soften those fingers, if you can't get rid of the crab hands, hands go firmly onto your hips, and that will absolutely sort out that common mistake. So another really common mistake that I see all the time is locking those knees out. Now, it is super tempting, mainly because bar is actually really hard. So when you deload, when you totally deload and you take it off the muscles, you get a tiny moment of respite, normally sneaks in towards the end of a class. So it's really important you have that personal reflection, that personal responsibility, and that understanding that you have to keep a softness in the knee to ensure that you retain the safety in that joint as well as the structures that support it and go around it. So an example would be, if we take it, let's say, just through a really simple releve and descende, you would come up onto the releve, up onto the toes, but it's tempting to let those knees drop out the back and hyperextend. If you are hypermobile, be really mindful of this, way on the side of caution, keep a bigger bend in the legs. So from here, let's say we work into a plie, which is essentially a squat. You come down and then you come up. The temptation again is to lock those knees out rather than smoothly sliding down, smoothly sliding up, keeping that lovely softness in the knees. It's the same from the front where you plie and you come together. You don't hang out into hyperextension. You squeeze the knees, but you keep that give. You keep that give in the knees. That is what keeps the joints safe. So a lot of people report knee pain having completed bar for an extended period of time. A lot of the time is because you are bouncing in and out of these movements rather than thinking constant tension, up, down, keeping it within the two end ranges of movement, keeping it in that middle portion so that you never ever go all the way down or all the way up. You actually build that stamina through that volume of time under tension, and the way you achieve that is by not cheating and hanging out into full extension there. I also see it with arms. Elbows pop out when they get tired because actually now they're just hanging out there. When your elbows are soft, you then have to work tricep, the muscles all around the back, and then your spinal extensors too. When you just let them hang out, actually it takes the work away. So it increases the chance of injury and it takes the work away. So it's just something to be really mindful of because it is probably the most common thing that I see that people could amend to improve the quality of practice and to improve and reduce their risk of injury in those surrounding movements. So the third mistake that I see often, it might annoy me as much as number one, to be honest. In fact, I think it does, is what I like to call flinging your body around the space without a semblance of control anywhere. Again, really common. And it's lovely because people are enthusiastic and they want to commit to the movement. But the control is where the benefit is here. So it's finding that control and finding that mind-muscular connection that actually affects a positive change from an aesthetics and a strength perspective. So don't fling, apply focus. So I'm going to give you an example. And this is a move I use all the time. So the leg starts in an arabesque. I'm going to draw the knee in. I'm going to bring the knee up to meet the chest. I then bend the base leg and I extend that top leg. So we draw in, we lift up, we drop down, we press away. You can see there is real focus, there is real control. Now when I do this with intention, I am working quad, glute on the base leg, glute quad on the other side, hip extension into that bum. In, up, down and press. Now I see this all the time. And it's blind enthusiasm with no execution of focus. So the body is flinging all over the place, but you're not actually going to get a response from the muscle because it is too reliant on momentum. It is too reliant on the inertia of the movement taking you through the series. What you might actually get is quite a cardiovascular response because your body is moving, but actually in terms of focused output, glute, quad, adductor, spinal extensor, abdominals, posture, all of those things that you would probably attend a bar class for, you are not maximizing that output. So another example would be, let's take a grand battement. I love this move. So from here, you extend and you bring it back to center. Now that is, although smooth and fluid, is really under control. So I let the leg fly, bringing it back, fly, bring it back to center. Now I see this all the time. I've got to get my leg higher. I've got to kick harder. When in reality, the work happens at the pause and the drop down. So rather than just taking your body through the movements, think what I always tell everybody to think: what are you trying to achieve? What is the goal? What do you want? So if you want to strengthen the quads, strengthen the abdominals, there is much more useful than there. Now, I joke and I exaggerate, but really be mindful that you need to master the movement, master the body, control the movement, think what am I trying to achieve, rather than just moving senselessly. And often I get the response from my clients, oh, I can't really feel it. I can't really feel it in the bottom cheek. Oh, I can't really feel it in the quad. Normally, that is because there's too much of a focus on efforting through the movement, and there needs to be a stronger focus on thinking about the movement, reining that enthusiasm in and channeling that enthusiasm, so that then the movement becomes really focused, really specific, and then it becomes massively effective. So the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is what I affectionately refer to as the duck butt. This. Now, it's so common. I see it literally all the time. People do their exercises with this real exaggerated lumbar shift that pushes my body further forward, so immediately I'm not massively balanced. The weight is onto my toes, and immediately the muscles that sit here in my lumbar spine are working like stink to hold me here. Now, it's a really, really common problem, particularly with beginners, and also particularly with people who naturally have more of a lumbar arch, which again is perfectly normal. But if that is you live here rather than here, then you have to be mindful not to let this really get away from you. Hard to embrace an abdominal connection, and also it forces the work into the lower back. One of the most common responses I get from beginners in this class is, oh, I really felt it in my back. So there is an element of working the muscles in your back, but if you only feel it here, this is because you weren't getting into the other muscles enough. You weren't getting into the bum, the hamstring, and the thigh enough. Now, it happens again, as with most things, when you get tired. So this is really important to layer into your practice, particularly if you're a beginner. When you get fatigued, rather than thinking, oh, I've got to keep going at maximum output, until you build capacity to tolerate load, rein it in a little bit, make the movement smaller and make it easier, because then you are learning beautiful habits rather than consolidating poor movement habits. And often there's this horrible misconception with exercise that if it's not horrible, it's not doing you any good. I hate that attitude. It could not be further away from how I teach, where I live in this space. I think work within the parameters where you are comfortable, safe, and in control, and above all things, executing beautifully, because then you will progress beautifully rather than really consolidate any injuries, any problems, any postural things that you might have going on. So an example of it would be, if I use this plie again, it's a good example. So from here, rather than drawing up with soft knees and a long spine, you get here to here, 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 and it's hanging into that duck bum where you just really let your body hang out. Another thing where you would see it, if I use this example again, would be to be here, up, there, and then letting the bum go. So you need to keep that sense of length. So in, up, soften, press away, not allowing that back to drop into too much of a lumbar curve. It is going to cause problems down the track. So my advice to correct it: keep the movement smaller, make the movement smaller, and be super mindful to drop breastbone down to belly button, pelvis up to belly button, and you almost work in your Pilates spinal imprint, albeit standing up tall, because that is really going to right it. Rather than being there, you just work up from underneath. And that is really, really going to help you find that lovely sense of alignment and height. So the final thing I wanted to talk to you about is the distribution of load and weight as you move through the movements. Now, one of the underlying principles and the point of a barre class is to try and achieve that lovely sense of height in the spine and length in the body. So lovely broad collarbones, lovely long spine, lovely long limbs. Now that is really useful from a posture perspective as well as from minimizing the stress on the joints as you work through the exercises. But one of the most common things I see is the weight comes too far forward. It actually works in harmony with the duck bum, the weight being too far forward, because what it will do is it will push all of the work into the back rather than those lower limbs. So to use an example, again, I'm going to use this plie because it's really helpful. So what we are after, again, range is not important, execution is. So for some people, their plie is going to be there. That's where they're going to work, in a really small range. If you want to, you can work all the way down and then work all the way up, obviously being mindful of that knee hyperextension. But what we don't want is this being the movement. I see this. People try and find the depth from their torso. So that's what it looks like, rather than working from the legs, working up in whatever range. So another example would be, I always give the option to lean over the bar because it makes the movement easier. But what you have to do is you need to lean over the bar and create height, not a slouch. So for example, if we were just going to do knee in, knee out, these are your options. You would start up tall, that's the slightly softer option, or you could lean over the bar. But look, my spine is still long, I'm still working into my abdominal brace. I'm absolutely not giving myself that duck bum. But what I'm not doing is leaning like this, because that again just rounds forward, and actually the work immediately goes into my back. And also I'm really then essentially standing, exercising like that, which I think we can all agree isn't going to be optimal. So finding the height in the spine and not allowing the weight to be too far forward is really going to improve the quality of the output of the movement. So if we use, let's say, a releve as our final example, what I'm getting here, I'll talk it from the feet up, is I'm working the muscles in my feet, I'm stabilizing my ankles, I'm working my calves, my inner thighs, my hamstrings, my bottom muscles, my spinal extensor muscles, the ones that keep me upright, all of the muscles that wrap around the back of my shoulder and then into this arm. And I'm really utilizing global muscles. I'm using the whole of me to facilitate this in a way that is optimal. As soon as you start to lean forward, it throws off the balance, it throws off the equilibrium, and you can see that I've lost that sense of postural height. So I would strongly recommend, particularly if you are a beginner, that you have a mirror reference somewhere. This is a really good tip, this is a top tip. High quality information. If you can see what you are doing wrong, it is much easier to right it. Where you think you are and where you are sometimes is not the same. And so actually having a mirror so that you can check everything that we've talked about today actually is going to go a long way in helping you resolve those small tweaks that are really, really going to optimize that output. So to summarize, you've got to be mindful of those soft hands. When in doubt, stick them on your hips. You've got to be really careful not to hyperextend those knees. Keep that lovely give in the movement. Apply focus and intention. Don't flail mindlessly. Be really careful not to let that back do the majority of the work by letting those rib cages pop out and that bum pop out behind you. And then finally, just really think about the distribution of the weight and really finding the height. So I hope you found that useful, I hope you found that interesting, and I hope that you can take from that some of those pointers and just tweak your performance in your bar class so that you can really have in mind longevity, safety, and effectiveness. And those 5 tricks are really going to help you achieve that. I'm really interested to know what you want to learn about. Now, we haven't even touched on any of the foot positioning, any of the hand positions per se. We haven't touched on any of the exercises that you would find in a bar class. So if you are interested, I'm super happy to do a video going through some common exercises and just ironing out any of the technique issues that you might have with that. But let me know what you want to learn more about. I'm really happy to deliver the content that you guys find useful and interesting and is going to be the most helpful for you. But I am Kirsty. I have been the Fit Business today. If you haven't yet liked and subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate that. And until I see you next time, please look after yourself, stay well and stay safe. And I will see you soon.